Well, welcome back, everybody. It's been a little bit since we've done a video, and I have my good friend Edgar here joining me today. How are you doing, Edgar?
Good, man. What the word on the street is? Where's Jordan at, man? So I guess I must have found you somewhere, man.
You
No, it's good to
found
be
me, yeah.
back,
You
bro.
just had to go looking. Yeah, I've been I've just life is just kind of crazy right now, and I won't go into everything, but one thing is we're in the process of moving, and so my studio, I had to spend a lot of time just getting it cleaned back up because I've had boxes just stacked in here, and so it's just life is a bit hectic, but I've been missing doing these videos, and so I'm glad to be back doing another one, and this is an important one, and this is going to be kind of focusing in on the World Mission Society Church of God. I think, I know that people who follow this channel are often coming from not only that specific group, but some are coming from, Shincheonji or JMS or other groups that they may have been a part of. And so I think what we're going to talk about here could have some application to all those, but the main goal of this video is to kind of focus in on something we've talked about before, something that we're going to continue to talk about, I'm sure, but focus on Ahnsahnghong, who the WMSCOG, the World Mission Society Church of God, teaches is second coming Christ. And I think most members of this organization, their faith kind of stands or falls on the teachings of Ahnsahnghong and what they believe about him and the different prophecies about him. It's like he's at the center of it. And so what we're going to do here, and I guess before I say this, I want to just to ask you, the viewer, especially if you're a member, to just stop for a minute, because as I was thinking about doing this video, I just recognized that one of the key groups of people, I suppose, that we're hoping to reach, like when we make these videos about these sort of topics, one of the main sort of categories of people that I have in mind, I'm sure Edgar has in mind, is current members who may, for whatever reason, decide to click on this video. I don't know how common that is, but I know it happens because I was just scrolling through the comments of some of our other videos and seeing current members commenting. So what I'm going to ask you is just to stop for a minute and listen, because I'm fully aware that what your church has taught you about people like myself and people like Edgar is that we are basically Satan, right? We're controlled by Satan. We're false prophets. We're whatever derogatory kind of title or name you want to put on us. I know that that's what you've been taught to see us as. We're internet slanderers who are just spreading lies and trying to destroy the Church of God. I would just challenge you to actually, it's one thing to be told that and to believe it, but it's another thing, and I think a more comes from more of a place of integrity to actually give the person that you're applying those sort of derogatory names to, give them a fair hearing, and then you decide for yourself if you think that's true. If you listen through this whole video and at the end of it, you're like, yep, I've listened to everything they had to say, and I think they're just possessed by Satan, and they've got demons in their closets and all these horrible things. I think that's true. If that's what you think, that's fine. But I think like the Proverbs talks about, giving like the fool answers before hearing out an argument. I'm not quoting that accurately, but you get the idea. It's like the wise person listens before like forming an opinion about a person or an idea. And so I'm just asking you, as current members, if you're watching this, and also former members who maybe you've come out, but you're still believe the doctrine, and maybe you still have that. I know how deeply ingrained those sort of beliefs can be, and how you see somebody like me on the internet or somebody like Edgar on the internet talking about this church, and your immediate thought is just, oh, that's just an evil slanderer who's just has these evil intentions. I honestly think that if you knew me in real life, and if you knew Edgar in real life and saw that I'm just a dude, I've got 4 kids, I try to do my best to love other people and seek the truth as best as I can. I think if you actually, and I'd say the same about Edgar, I think if you actually stopped for a minute to get to know us, I think you would come to see that maybe we're not quite as evil and insidious as the church has told you we are. So that's just a very long thing I wanted to say up front. Just to say, please give us a fair hearing, because I know how many of you probably come to these videos and you just immediately say, oh, that's a slander, and you click off. Or you write your angry comment and then you click off. And I just think wisdom would have you actually listen to what is being said, and then you can evaluate what you actually think about what we said and form your opinion. So we're going to talk about Ahnsahnghong today. And I think that some of what we're going to talk about is going to be familiar to some of you. Some of you may know some of this information. I think for some members, some of what we're going to say might be a bit shocking when you find out that the WMSCOG has actually lied to you in different ways, and lied to you about Ahnsahnghong, and has done things like remove chapters from his book, or told you that certain biblical prophecies point toward Ahnsahnghong when they really don't, with further analyzation, as we'll do in this video. So now, before we jump into it, I just wanted to real quick also say that Edgar has a YouTube channel, Diffusing the WMSCOG, and I wanted to let people know that and go follow his channel, because I've been really happy to see that, because I've been a little bit more quiet on my channel lately, but as I've been more quiet, Edgar's been pumping out interviews, which I think is so needed. And so go check out Diffusing the WMSCOG. And Edgar, is there, like, I guess real quick, just like what made you want to start that channel? Kind of talk about that a bit, and tell people if there's anything besides the channel. I think you're maybe on Instagram, but anything else you want to point people to, let us know.
Well, the reason I started this channel is obviously because I'm Judas Iscariot, man. I'm possessed by like 20. No, I'm playing. No, so the same reason why I come on here, and I look up to you, man. I look up to everybody that stood up and said something against this church when it was easier for people to just go their own way. And so one thing that I realized, though, is since I've left, the church, members come and they give their interviews, and they're just, the members that don't give their interviews really is where you see it the most. And I get emails from people all over the world, and it's like, the church is saying this about me, the church is saying that about me. They even got their own family sometimes, like, starting rumors about them because it's influenced by the church. And it's so crazy to me. And I was just like, you know what? People deserve to have their side of the story told. Ex-members deserve that. And so, just trying to flush that out, man. And obviously the reason we do this is because this type of organization needs to be held accountable. There's no other way to say it. I mean, there's too much stuff going on, man. There's children involved in this. You know what I mean? They're ruining people's lives. They're separating families. They're doing so many awful things. And it needs to be talked about. It needs to be talked about. And, and either way, with the interviews or going through scripture, whatever it is, man, it just needs to be talked about. And so I think that's one of the biggest reasons that I do it. I gave, almost a decade of my life, more than a decade of my life, to this place. And, I think it's only right that I put in a little bit of work to also, help people get out of that place.
Absolutely. Yeah. And for those who don't know, there's a pretty cool story behind the scenes here, Edgar is actually the reason that I started making videos about this group, because about, I don't know, what was it? Was it like 6 years, 7 years?
Yeah, it's been
8
a
years?
while,
I don't.
man.
It's been around that time period, 7 or 8 years ago, that I encountered Edgar and other members while Edgar was still a member of the church, and so we had a handful of meetings and sat down and talked and debated the Bible. Edgar was, just so you know, from my perspective, Edgar was very much a devoted member. Not for a minute was I thinking, would ever have dreamed that one day Edgar would be, making videos with me refuting this group. Like, it still is like crazy when I put myself back in that coffee shop where we first talked and debated, because you were just so passionate, and you even had some arguments that made me walk away and scratch my head like, that's an interesting argument, and I'll have to go away and think about like what would be a good way to respond to that. And so it's just really cool that now here you are.
And then I also debated with you online under an alias. Remember that? When you,
That's right.
Kelsey, and was Jeremy. You, Jeremy,
Yes,
and Kelsey.
that's
Yeah,
right.
So
Yeah.
that was
So
fun.
Edgar came onto a live video that we were doing while he was still a member, and even on a live video we kind of interacted and debated. And so I think that is still up on the channel somewhere. I'll try to remember to put a link to that, because people might be interested in hearing
The infamous
WMSCOG
Watchman?
member Edgar. Watchman, yeah. That's right. So anyways, yeah, definitely make sure to go and check out his channel. And I'll link that stuff in the description of the video. So without further ado, let's jump into this. And we're going to try to get through multiple points, because what I want to do, if nothing else, again, I have two main categories of people in mind. I have current members. And my goal for them would be, if nothing else, just at least get you to think, maybe in ways that you haven't before, to ask questions that maybe you haven't asked before. And I think more than that, to have access to certain information that the World Mission Society Church of God has not given to you. And I think that is unfair and unjust that they withhold certain evidence or certain facts, certain information from members. And then for former members, especially those who are maybe freshly have come out of this group, who are still, I hear about people who have been out for years, like 7 years or so, and they're still just tormented in fear about certain doctrines because they've been too scared to go and look into it. And so what I'm hoping to do is give you information that you can look into certain doctrines, specifically here about Ahnsahnghong, and realize, oh, wait a minute. Like, I don't need to be afraid of hell. I don't need to be afraid of this or that. I don't need to be afraid of not keeping Passover and all these different things, because all these things that the World Mission Society Church of God taught me about Ahnsahnghong and so many other things, it's just false. It's just not true. And so I'm hoping to alleviate some of that, that burden that I know former members who have left the church, some of them carry for many years after. So let's start with this. For current members, I just want to ask this question. Did you know that Ahnsahnghong wrote a book? I know many of you will know this, but some of you won't. He wrote a book that was one of the primary purposes for him writing this book was to refute the idea that the Bible teaches this concept of there being a mother God. He wrote a book where he makes argument after argument using scriptures to prove that the Bible does not teach the existence of a mother God. And so this book is called Problems with the New Jerusalem, the Bride, and Women's Veils. It's interesting to me that the World Mission Society Church of God knows about this book, but they don't give members access to it. They don't publish it like with the other truth books or with Ahnsahnghong's other books. And Edgar, I'll just say, like, I want to get your thoughts on this. Why do you think that is? Why is it that they put, they give members this book, And, this book and so many other of Ahnsahnghong's writings, they believe and they teach that this guy is God, which means to them, these books, Ahnsahnghong's writings, I mean, they're on the same level as the Bible. So I just find it odd that Ahnsahnghong would have an entire book that he wrote, but for some reason, they decide to not really tell members about it. And if nothing else, they don't publish it, of course, and try to get members to read it. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, because they're hiding things. They're hiding things and they're not presenting you all the facts, so you can't make an informed decision. A lot of the books that and the chapters that they take away from Ahnsahnghong's books are very incriminating and totally contradict what the World Mission Society teaches. That is the main reason why they don't want you reading these books, because there's multiple failed prophecies. You have the understanding that the idea of Mother God is totally insane by Ahnsahnghong, and it's just some stuff that once you read it, there's no going back. You can't say he's God and really believe that and totally dismiss his books. That you can't do that. That's why they go to such great lengths to get basically hide these books from you. But these books are available. I have those books right behind me, actually, on my shelf.
Yeah. Are those the original?
Yeah, man. So I've been busy. I've been busy, wow, Jordan, since the last time we talked, bro. But yeah, I'm in talks with Ahnsahnghong's original church, and they actually gave it to me. They came to Kansas, and one of the leaders, he was actually one of the elders of the World Mission Society Church of God in the inner circle. One of the senior pastors, he left the World Mission Society in 2014, joined Ahnsahnghong's original church in South Korea after realizing that it was all a crock. And so he joins this church, gets all the information, meets me. We start talking. We become really good friends. He actually comes down to Kansas, stays the night at my house, and he actually gives me these books and signs them over to me. So I have Ahnsahnghong's original books right behind me. And yeah, it's a pretty fascinating story, man, when you start seeing the actual beginnings of the church, how it actually started in comparison to what the World Mission Society teach. Yeah.
Man, that's a whole other video that would be
that's a whole nother video, bro.
Maybe even getting that person you're talking about. I don't know if you'd ever want to share some of that, but that could be fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, let me share my screen real quick, and you can see this, because what I think is important to point out before we talk about and look at specifically some of the things that Ahnsahnghong taught in this book is that this is the preface of the book. Again, here's the title, and I'm going to link in the video description below this web page where you can read the book yourself. This is an English translation. But what he says in the preface is that this booklet, and again, this is quoting the book, this booklet was published to prevent troublemakers who misinterpret and behave fanatically, explain the errors in the books that In published, and testify of the unchanging truth of the Church of God. So we've talked about this before, so I don't want to spend a ton of time on this, but just for a little background on what this book was written for. So there's a specific woman, In, that was claiming that she was the New Jerusalem, that she was Mother God, that the Bible spoke about. So Ahnsahnghong wrote this book to refute that idea. Now, one of the things that the WMSCOG is going to say in response to this is, okay, well, Ahnsahnghong wrote this for a very specific time and very specific purpose, which was only to refute this specific woman, In. And so it doesn't apply now. But if you're going to say that, the moment the WMSCOG says that, immediately you can see that they do not believe what Ahnsahnghong said. This is part one of where the WMSCOG's beliefs and what they say is true separates from what Ahnsahnghong says. And this happens over and over again that we're going to show you. because what Ahnsahnghong says here is that actually the things he writes about in this book, these things are the unchanging truth of the Church of God. Not just for one moment in time. If what Ahnsahnghong writes in this book is unchanging, that means it was true then about Suen and what she was saying about herself, and it's true now if other women say the same thing that Suen was saying. So this is the unchanging truth of God. So the first thing in this book that I want to point out is in chapter 7, where it talks about Galatians 4. So, Edgar, real quick, Galatians 4, why is that significant to this whole discussion about Mother God?
Yeah, so Galatians chapter 4 is their favorite verse. You know, they put it on the bookmarks. Though, you know, I even had it inscribed in the front of my Bible. Basically, Galatians 4:26 is the verse that says, "But the Jerusalem that is above is free, and she is our mother." So sometimes they'll read verse 22, verse 28, but really verse 26 is, you know, where the Galatians 4 in general, this is where they love to go to basically say, look, the Bible teaches that there's a God the Mother. The Jerusalem that is above, that they say in the last day comes down, that is our Heavenly Mother personified, this lady in Korea.
Yeah. Yep. So in this book, he quotes Galatians 4:22 through 26, which ends by saying, "But the Jerusalem that is above is free, and she is our mother." And then he says, they use this passage to assert that Suen is our mother who has come down from heaven. Suen truly believes that Hagar is the earthly Jerusalem while Sarah is the heavenly Jerusalem. The only reason that the Apostle Paul wrote Galatians 4:22 through 26 is to clarify that the history of the family of Abraham is a prophecy. So then he quotes verse 24, which talks about how these things, so this description of the earthly and the heavenly Jerusalem, that these things are to be taken figuratively, for the women represent two covenants. One covenant is from Mount Sinai and bears children who are to be slaves. This is Hagar. So then he says that this is a prophecy of the old covenant and the new covenant. Hagar refers to the law of Moses received on Mount Sinai. And then he says Sarah, or the New Jerusalem, refers to the new covenant that Jesus Christ established in Mark's attic. So I'm gonna, again, I'm not gonna spend a ton of time on this specific point here, but I'm going to again link the description to this book so you can read all this yourself. The point of all this is just to say you can look at what Ahnsahnghong believed Galatians 4:26 was all about, and what you're going to find is that what he believed it was all about is, one, he'll refute the idea that this is teaching the existence of some, you know, female deity, a mother, and he'll emphasize that no, this is actually just a figurative analogy of the new covenant. That's what New Jerusalem is all about. So if you want to read about that more, about the Galatians part, again, that's in chapter 7 of this book.
Hey, Jordan, real quick, can I tag in on this? Or were you gonna read below that? Right. Which there, what you have on the screen.
Go for it.
It says, we'll start where it says, "This is a prophecy." A little bit above that, where you got your mouse floating. Yeah, that one. So this is a prophecy of the old covenant and the new covenant. Hagar refers to the law of Moses received on Mount Sinai and the Israelites of the flesh of the earthly Jerusalem, while Sarah refers to the new covenant that Jesus Christ established in Mark's attic in the spirit and the spiritual Israelites. So Sarah, according to Ahnsahnghong, represents the new covenant that Jesus Christ established, right? And so it says the Apostle Paul is speaking of the heavenly Jerusalem. So Sarah, right? He's connecting Sarah, new covenant, with the heavenly Jerusalem. Then it says, nevertheless, Suen claims that she is the heavenly Jerusalem and that she has come down to earth. According to the prophecy of Galatians 4:22 through 24, Sarah is the heavenly Jerusalem. However, if the new Jerusalem is Suen, she has then married her son. The reason for this is that Isaac is the son of Sarah, and it is said that Isaac is also Christ. Ahnsahnghong has then become the mother of Christ as well as the bride, wife of Christ. Ahnsahnghong states that I am Isaac with weakness of sight, while claiming that she is Sarah, who is the heavenly Jerusalem. She is then saying that she will live with Isaac, who is her son. How extremely scandalous is this? With this type of misguided delusion, she has become a false prophet and has attempted to gain power. Now watch this. Please think of what will become of her sin and the sin of those who follow after her. So what is Ahnsahnghong saying
Yeah.
here? He's saying, how scandalous is this idea that Sarah with the new covenant or the heavenly Jerusalem could be the bride of Christ, because Christ represents Isaac in the Bible. So by claiming that a woman is the one who fulfills this prophecy of a heavenly Jerusalem or this heavenly Sarah, that wouldn't make sense, because she becomes the bride of Isaac, which is Christ. So then you have incest. So he says, how scandalous is this? And he says, even at the end, he says, what will become of her sin and the sin of those who follow after her? And isn't this exactly what Zhang Gil Jah claims for herself? Isn't what the World Mission Society Church of God teaches? If Ahnsahnghong was alive, he would say, how scandalous is that idea? That's incest. That's what they're teaching. And then one more point real quick. Keep going down. Yeah, scroll down. Keep going. Right there. So here,
You looking for this?
Chapter, yeah. So in chapter 8, right there in that paragraph says, the New Jerusalem, which is written of in Revelation chapter 21, verse 1 through 4, the tabernacle of God abides with human beings. However, this tabernacle is a spiritual building, not a person. So that's very different than what the World Mission Society Church of God teach. They twist the words and they say, no, actually, Ahnsahnghong taught that she is a person and she's not a spiritual building. So who's right? Why aren't they in contrast with each other? This is why they don't want you reading this book. This is why they took it away.
And this is why, as we've said many times before, you cannot, it's impossible to be able to fully believe, on the one hand, that the World Mission Society Church of God is the true church, the only church, and that they're teaching the absolute truth. And at the same time, to believe that Ahnsahnghong is God and he's teaching the absolute truth. You can't believe both of those things at the same time. The reason for that is because over and over and over again, what the Church of God teaches contradicts clearly what Ahnsahnghong believed and specifically taught. We've already shown you 2 or 3 examples here where he says the New Jerusalem is it's not a person, and obviously how we started out, where the WMS is going to say about this book that this was just a temporary teaching that was taken away. It was only, he withdrew this teaching. It was only for a certain time, but you look at what Ahnsahnghong actually said about this book, and he said it's the unchanging truth of God. So you can't believe both at the same time. You're going to have to choose one or the other. If you believe Ahnsahnghong is God, you have to reject the WMSCOG. At the very least, you have to say the WMS has some serious errors in what they're teaching because it doesn't line up with what Ahnsahnghong is teaching. Or you have to say, no, I believe the Church of God is correct. And then if you're going to do that, you're going to be forced into a position of saying, well, then Ahnsahnghong was wrong. Because again, they contradict each other. They can't both be right because they're saying the opposite thing. This book becomes like an argument between Ahnsahnghong and the World Mission Society Church of God. Ahnsahnghong is responding to and refuting and debating against the very same ideas that the World Mission Society Church of God argues for. The way that the World Mission Society Church of God interprets certain Bible passages, Ahnsahnghong looks at those and he refutes those very ideas. And so I think that's problematic. And so this part is in chapter 8, this part about the tabernacle being a building, not a person. Was there anything else you wanted to say about that section? Because I wanted to jump to chapter 11 next.
Yes, I just want to mention about how you were saying that this the unchanging truth, and like you said, it pits them against each other, right? That's exactly what it does, and so you got to decide who are you going to believe. Is you going to believe Ahnsahnghong, who you claim is the root of David, or are you going to claim the people that came after him, that all these things didn't begin to change until after he died? Right. And so, it's funny when they say here, the thing is, I don't know if they probably have, Jordan, but let me just recap real quick the story that they say about this Suin, because I found some crazy stuff, about her that I didn't know before. So when I was in the church, they taught all the leaders. We had educations about Suin when this book came to light. When New Covenant Passover Church of God posted it, online, and then Michelle Cologne did the examining site and posted the links. I remember they were doing damage control, and they basically had educations where they would have the members, go to the main churches, and the pastors would pretty much explain that this book was like a countermeasure that Ahnsahnghong wrote, because this lady Suin broke into his book bag, and when she had an opportunity, she looked in it, saw the notes that Ahnsahnghong was going to testify about Zhang Gil Jah as God the Mother. She takes them for herself and just starts saying she's God the Mother. And so that's the story that was fed to us. And then like you were mentioning, they say that it was only a temporary book, right? Funny thing is, he doesn't mention that anywhere in the booklet, right? He doesn't say this is a temporary book. We know it was published twice. We know he said it was the unchanging truth. We know that the church was very small in Korea at that time, and Ahnsahnghong was already traveling from church to church, so it would have been way easier to just go to these churches and address it directly. He didn't do that. He put it into writing for a reason.
Why would you do that?
Yeah. Exactly. So, and then here's the kicker. Members, what they told you about Suin is a lie. She's not this random crazy lady who just, first of all, ask yourself, where does she even come from? They just insert her in that specific timeline and say some crazy lady in the church just randomly breaks into Ahnsahnghong's book bag. Right. And then she comes up with this crazy story after reading the notes. Suin was actually a leader in Ahnsahnghong's original church. She was in the General Assembly. I have a photo from 1972 or 1973 where she is in the General Assembly behind Ahnsahnghong. She's not just some crazy lady who pops up out of nowhere. She was in the church. And here's the thing. She was not they say she copied Ahnsahnghong. From all the information that I've gathered, it was actually Ahnsahnghong who copied most of his theology, a lot of the prophecies that he came up with concerning King David, Melchizedek. He stole those from her. She has a book called God in the Flesh. And in that book, she stated these prophecies. She tailor-made them for Ahnsahnghong because they were working together. Ahnsahnghong actually copied almost word for word from her book, God in the Flesh, and that was what became known later as the first edition of the Green Book before it was changed. Why doesn't the church tell you that?
Yeah, very interesting. So much there that the Church of God, just information that they withhold from members. And the question you should ask yourself is, why would they do that? I think the answer is obvious, because this information doesn't help their cause. It presents massive issues for them and what they teach. Okay, so let's move to chapter 11. There's just a quote here I want to look at. And again, if you want the full context of this, there will be a link in the description to this book where you can go and read all these things and see if we're just making this up or if this is all here. So he says, however, Suin, is stating that the new heaven and new earth is here now, and the new Jerusalem is living now on this earth. Nobody except someone who is not in their right state of mind can believe and follow after this. Please think of this carefully. So only somebody who is not in their right state of mind, according to Ahnsahnghong, can believe that the new Jerusalem is here now. What you're going to find, again, if you read this book and if you read some of his other writings, is that Ahnsahnghong was very clear that the new Jerusalem will not be here on this earth until 1,000 years after the world has ended. And I think maybe actually that's the next. No, that's actually later on, but we'll get to that quote. But is there anything, Edgar, that you want to say about this section here?
No, man, I just want people to pay attention to this. And just ask yourself, why are they hiding this? When you read this, does it make sense with what the World Mission Society Church of God teaches you? And if it doesn't, that's a red flag. Do you see why they're not showing you this? I mean, I wouldn't want to show you this if I was making this stuff up. I'd try to hide and throw away the key, right? And so, you know, I just want members to think.
Yep. So actually, let me just jump to that real quick. And again, this is in chapter 16. So in a minute, I'm going to jump back to a previous chapter. But just because we're talking about this, we'll just look at this one real quick. So he says, when this tabernacle referenced in Revelation 21, 3, 9 through 10 comes down to this earth, it will be 1,000 years after the world has ended. Edgar, let me ask you something. Has the world ended yet?
I mean, I don't know. I took a nap earlier. I mean, if between that, of course not. Of course
Did you
not.
Miss it? Maybe.
Yeah. Hey, they've been talking about the rapture. Hasn't ended.
Yeah, they have. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it happened when you were taking your nap. But as far as I know, to my knowledge, I'm looking around. It seems like it's still here. Seems like we're still here. Things are still moving along as they have been. Yeah. So it seems like the world hasn't ended yet.
Exactly.
So that's a problem. If the world hasn't ended yet, and Ahnsahnghong says that the only time this tabernacle is going to come down to this earth is 1,000 years after the world has ended. Members, if that's what Ahnsahnghong taught, how in the world is it that the New Jerusalem is sitting right now in South Korea? How's that possible? Again, you have to either believe the World Mission Society Church of God or believe Ahnsahnghong. Or you could do it. Or you could just throw both of them out and realize that, in many ways they're both full of it. Yeah. And there's problems with both. But you can't believe both at the same time, or you're believing a blatant contradiction. And God, it talks about in the New Testament, I think it's in Corinthians somewhere, where Paul, I think, says God is not the author of confusion. If somehow you're supposed to mesh these two things together, it's just utter confusion. How can you have the Church of God on one hand saying the New Jerusalem is here and has been for decades, and at the same time on the other hand, you have God saying, quote unquote, God, Ahnsahnghong, saying, no, the New Jerusalem isn't going to show up on this earth until 1,000 years after the world has ended. That's utter confusion. So something's not right there. One of them is not right, or both of them aren't. Both of them could be wrong, or one of them could be wrong, but they can't both be right. And so you have to choose. Now let's jump back to this is a very significant part, and then we'll try to wrap up this part and get to another point. We'll wrap up this conversation about the book. But chapter 15, and before we read this, I want to show you guys this, where this is the staff of Moses. So just give a quick explanation, Edgar, of what this book is.
Yeah, so the book, the Staff of Moses, is a book that's basically nothing but countermeasures for insistences that people, that the World Mission Society heard, and so in order to do like damage control for the members not to leave, all the strongest arguments that are out there on the internet or that people's made, they put answers for them in this book. And it's similar to what the JWs do in the Mormons. It's just the only difference they don't tell you is that a lot of these countermeasures, they're actually doing countermeasures for Ahnsahnghong. So
Yes.
it's
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
very ironic. They're refuting the root of David, who they claim is the one that they follow and is the one who is infallible and can only interpret the Bible, and they rather side with Jucho Kim, right? And it's just weird.
Yep. So right here, what you have, this book represents the World Mission Society Church of God, because this is their official teaching. So now you have this, you have the World Mission Society Church of God, and we're going to compare it to this, what Ahnsahnghong says. So I'm just going to read a couple quotes. And again, hopefully you can get, I know this book isn't as readily available as a lot of the other books, but this is in chapter 2, titled False Insistence, the Bride and Revelation 22:17 indicates the church saints. So they're trying to refute that idea that the bride of Christ or the New Jerusalem is the saints. So here's just a couple quotes. Therefore, and this is the quote, therefore the bride does not refer to us, the saints, but our mother. And then again, another quote, therefore, the Spirit and the bride who give us the water of life can never be the saints. Okay, so what's the clear teaching of the World Mission Society Church of God? It's that the bride of Christ, the New Jerusalem, is not the saints. Can never be the saints. Okay, let's see what Ahnsahnghong has to say. And here's, again, in his book, the bride of the Lamb are the 144,000 saints who have accepted the gospel. In addition, it is stated that there is an actual tabernacle, New Jerusalem, that the Lord has prepared. And again, jumping down a little bit into chapter 16, it says, he quotes Revelation 22:17, and he says, it is true that the bride here is the same bride found in Revelation 21:9-10, since it is written, come, I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb. Now here is Ahnsahnghong's evaluation of the bride. And he says, quote, the wife of the Lamb is the saints, unquote. World Mission Society Church of God, the wife, the bride of Christ, can never be the saints, is what they say. Ahnsahnghong says, the wife of the Lamb is the saints. Yeah. Who are you going to believe? You can't believe them both. Yeah. So now to think about for a moment, to think about former members who have come out of this group, if you're the ones listening to this, what I'm hoping this is accomplishing for you is that it's alleviating some of the fear and some of that, that deeply ingrained fear that groups like this implant in you, that even after you might leave this group, it just stays with you and follows you because you feel so hung up and bound up by different doctrines that you don't know what to do with. Hopefully what you're seeing here is that you don't need to give that sort of attention or you don't need to care so much, I guess, about what the WMS is saying, because they contradict themselves. They contradict Ahnsahnghong. There's something here that is not right. There's something here that is very messy and confusing. And so I hope you're starting to see that, hey, maybe if I'm seeing all this now, maybe some of the things the World Mission Society Church of God taught me, maybe I don't need to worry about that so much, because obviously it seems like maybe they don't know what they're talking about. Because if they're teaching that Ahnsahnghong is Christ, and then at the same time they're writing these books that completely refute and reject these ideas that he believed, then there's something really wrong there. And this is a group that obviously doesn't deserve you living your life in fear of their teachings, because they're full of holes, full of problems. So, Edgar, is there anything you want to say about this section here?
Yeah, well, just to your last point where you said it's full of holes, man. They got, like I said before, they got more holes than Swiss cheese. But as far as I love that you went to this specific part of the book, because what they'll do is in the countermeasure, when they're reading the countermeasure to you, they'll be like, "Yeah, we know Ahnsahnghong wrote that. Oh, brother, don't let those slanderers fool you. Don't you see that in the Bible?" A word can have two different meanings according to the context, like if they care about context. But they'll say, yeah, look here in this verse in John chapter 1, Jesus is called the Lamb of God. But in John 21, Jesus says, feed my lambs. So is he saying feed himself? You see how it's different meanings according to the context? So yes, Ahnsahnghong might have mentioned the bride is the saints, because in one context in the book of Ephesians, the bride can mean the saints. But in Revelations, the bride cannot be the saints. The bride has to be God the Mother. Well, I'm sorry to tell you, Ahnsahnghong just said right here, it is written that the Spirit and the bride say, come. Revelations 22:17. It is true that the bride here is the same bride found in Revelations 21:9-10. Since it is written, come, I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb. The wife of the Lamb is the saints. Deal with it, World Mission Society. Who are you going to side with? The root of David, Melchizedek, King David himself, or Jucho Kim? What's it going to be?
And I'll just point out too that they can use that argument that, hey, different words have different meanings, and yeah, it's fine that sometimes Ahnsahnghong acknowledged that the wife of Christ is referenced as being the saint, but in Revelation, that's not what he believed. Well, I would just challenge the World Mission Society, Church of God, or any member, show me a place in any of Ahnsahnghong's writings or teachings where he took passages from Revelation, these specific passages, referencing the bride of Christ, the New Jerusalem. Show me any teaching of Ahnsahnghong, any writing, where he took those passages and applied them to anything other than being about the saints. Because you can tell me all day long. You can tell me all day long that that's what Ahnsahnghong believed. You can tell me that Ahnsahnghong believed that the bride of Christ in Revelation was Mother God. But I'm going to take his writings over what you're saying. So if I'm looking here at what he actually said, and he's saying, no, the wife of the Lamb is the saints, it doesn't really mean too much to me that you're just seemingly coming up out of nowhere with this idea that he also believed that the wife of the Lamb is Mother God. I would just say, if you're going to say that, put your money where your mouth is, I suppose. Show me the proof. Give me the evidence. Show me the teaching. Where is that? Is it in this book? Is it in this one? I sure can't find it. Other people who have searched these books haven't found it. So where are you getting that from? And I would ask you too, if you believe that he's the root of David, second coming Christ, why is it that you're putting these ideas, these beliefs in his mouth that he never taught? And so, yeah, like Edgar said, I would just say you have to deal with these things. And I think what's evident, what we have before us, is that when Ahnsahnghong looked at these references in Revelation to the bride of Christ, he very clearly believed and identified this bride as being the saints, nothing else. So if you're going to tell me that he believed at the same time that the bride of Christ is Mother God, you're going to have to prove it. And so far you haven't. Nobody has. No member has. The church hasn't. They're just saying that. And in doing that, as far as I can tell, they're doing nothing more than bearing false witness. They're lying about Ahnsahnghong. They're putting words in his mouth. And what does God say about liars? What does God say about bearing false witness? Not good things about people who do that. So, again, this book will be linked in the description of the video. This is something we've talked about in videos in the past, so we're going to go ahead and move on. And let's see, what would be a good place? So, Edgar, let's go ahead and go to one of the points that you wanted to talk about, because I know there's the, if we have time, we'll get to this. We're going to have to see how much time we have, and this might be something we have to come back to later, but hopefully we can get through all these points. But they're just as a little bit of a teaser to another thing we're going to point out in what we're hoping to communicate, and some of the points that we're wanting to bring up is that the 3 deleted chapters. So the Green Book, I don't know, and again, this is something that some of you will be aware of, but many of you will not be aware of. This book that the World Mission Society Church of God claims to be, again, if Ahnsahnghong is the root of David, second coming Christ, these are the words of God. Well, did you know that this book, older editions, the original editions, contained 3 extra chapters that for some mysterious reason, the World Mission Society Church of God felt like they should just delete those chapters. Let's just take them out of the book. These are the words of God, supposedly, that he wrote, but let's just do away with them. That's something that hopefully we can get to at some point in this video. We'll see again, time permitting. But just to kind of tease that point, because I think that's a really significant point, that there were 3 entire chapters of writings from Ahnsahnghong that the World Mission Society Church of God removed. And there's also, you can look at older editions and compare them to the current editions and see that not only were there 3 chapters removed, there's been many alterations. They've changed the wording in multiple places, which seems to me, Edgar, if I'm not mistaken, according to the Bible, according to Revelation even, and according to the Church of God, changing the words of God, that's not a good thing to do, right?
Yeah. Luckily for them, they didn't change it. They just completely removed 3 chapters.
So maybe that's different. Yeah. But God says, do not add to or take subtract away from. Yeah, or subtract. Well, they subtracted 3 chapters. So if they're going to do that, they better have a pretty good explanation for it. I don't think they do. But let's hold off on that, and just that'll be a little bit of a teaser for something we can talk about later. Because I know you wanted, Edgar, to talk about the fig tree and Elijah. I don't know which of those you might want to get into next, but go ahead and take it away with whichever direction you want to go.
Yeah, man. So, I think because you brought up the 3 chapters, I mean, even in the Elijah, we can get into a little bit of the chapters itself. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to share my screen maybe here in a little bit, but if we can do that.
I think you should be able to share it.
Okay. I see the button down there. So, but anyway, so I think Mission of Elijah would be a good one, just because I think I saw you covered fig tree like many years ago, like in the beginning. And
I wasn't a huge fan of how I covered it. I think that could be done better. But I did talk about that a little bit. But I think more could be said about it.
Yeah, for sure. And we can get into that depending, on the time, like we said. But, the fig tree is something that I've heard also other members mention. We've mentioned it in videos before, but never broken down extensively. But Mission of Elijah is something I've never heard anybody speak about, because Mission of Elijah is not in any of the sermon books. Mission of Elijah is one of those advanced subjects that only the teachers, the leaders of the churches, some get to hear this kind of teaching, and then they themselves, not everyone is allowed to teach it, right? So Mission of Elijah is one that I actually used to teach when I was in the church, and I think it'd be interesting to kind of go over that a little bit, and then just kind of see, sure, the holes in it, and even the difference between the way Ahnsahnghong teaches it and the way that the World Mission Society teaches it, because surprise, there's a difference between how they teach it, right?
Yeah.
So who would have
If you didn't
thought
see that coming.
it? So let's get into a little bit about this prophecy of the mission of Elijah. So what the World Mission Society will teach on this, and I'll say now, as of, well, I can't even say currently because I haven't been in for 5 years, so I don't know if they're still teaching it. But when I was a member from 2010 until about 2021, they were still teaching the mission of Elijah. And so the gist of it is this, that just as the Bible prophesied that Elijah was going to appear 2,000 years ago, nowadays the Bible also prophesies that Elijah must appear before the great and dreadful day of the Lord. And so they'll say that is talking about, right before Judgment Day. And so how do they get to that? So they'll go to the book of Malachi chapter 4, and then verse 5. It says, "See, I will send the prophet Elijah to you before the great and dreadful day of the Lord comes. He will turn the hearts of the parents to their children and the hearts of the children to their parents, or else I will come and strike the land with total destruction." And so what they'll say is, 2,000 years ago, the people were waiting for Elijah to appear. That was the sign to recognize Christ. And in the same way, people are waiting for Elijah to appear in the last days, because that's going to actually be the sign that through which we can receive Christ, right? And so what is the mission of Elijah? Well, the Bible says Elijah is going to come and he's going to return the hearts of the children to their fathers, right? So basically he's going to return these people to God, right? Turn the hearts of the people to God. And so they'll say, who is going to fulfill this mission of Elijah? Then, I think it might be easier if we just, read through it instead of going verse by verse. So Matthew chapter 27, verse 46 is the famous verse where Jesus says, "Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani," right? My God, why have you forsaken me? And so then what they will say is, this right here, you understand who is the one that's going to fulfill this mission of Elijah by what Jesus said as he was dying on the cross. And so what Jesus said was, "Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani." So Eli means what?
My God.
Yeah, Eli means God, and then Jah means Jehovah. So when Jesus is saying, "Eli, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani," the verse even says afterwards that the people believe he was calling. Some people believe he was calling Elijah, right? Because it's there in the verse. But actually, through this, we can understand that Elijah has to be fulfilled by God the Father, Jehovah. And they'll say, even though the name Elijah itself is broken down into two, Elijah. So God the Father, Jehovah. And so what they'll say is, before Judgment Day, just as Elijah appeared 2,000 years ago to prepare the way for Christ, that same Elijah needs to appear in the last days to also prepare the way for Christ. And so then they'll say, what was the mission of Elijah? How would Elijah carry out this mission of returning the children back to their parents, right? And so they'll go back to the Old Testament. They'll go to the time of Kings. It's actually 1 Kings chapter 16, verse 29. And it's the story of the Israelites and how King Ahab led the Israelites astray into worshiping Baal. And so then Elijah appears on the scene, right? In 1 Kings chapter 18, verse 30. And what he does is he begins to repair the altar of God, right? And so a lot of people that might be familiar with the story, he takes the 12 stones and he begins to rebuild this altar for God. And he begins to basically taunt, the Baal worshipers. And he's telling them, let's call upon, you call upon your God and I'll call upon God the Father, Jehovah. And the one who answers, right, that one is the one who is the actual true God. And so actually the Baal worshipers, there was 850 in number. That's significant because the World Mission Society will teach that there's 850 different denominations and doctrines of Christianity nowadays. And so they'll say Elijah went up against these 850 false prophets of Baal. And it was actually the Elijah was the one who received the answer from the Lord. And what does the Bible say? That the fire came down, and it just, it was the absolute proof that Elijah was the true prophet, because his sacrifice, his altar with the 12 stones, God poured fire down on it, while meanwhile the false prophets were calling on Baal, calling on their false gods, and no answer. And so basically what the World Mission Society tried to show through this is the true prophet in this case was who? Elijah, right? And then they'll go to a verse in Matthew chapter 17, verse 11, where it says that, where Jesus is asked about Elijah directly. And this was actually very significant. Let's go to Matthew chapter 17, verse 11 real quick. And so what they'll say in Matthew chapter 17, verse 11, it says here, Jesus replied, "To be sure, Elijah comes and will restore all things." So what they'll say is, Elijah, his purpose of appearing is to restore all things. And so as you saw in the case that we just saw in the Old Testament, the shadow, Elijah restored the covenant of God. He restored the people. He turned the people back to worshiping God, because after God answered them through fire, once the people realized that the Lord God Jehovah was the true God, what did they do? Elijah commanded them to go basically kill all the worshipers of Baal. And so the people basically returned to God, right? And so this is what they'll say. They'll say it took Elijah to restore something, right? In this case, the altar of God, the covenant with the 12 stones, in order for the people to return to God. Well, they'll say in the last days, this also must be accomplished by someone. Why? Because the covenant of God, the altar of God, has been torn down. And how do they make that make sense? Because as members, we were taught that during 325 AD, during 321 AD, during the period of the Dark Ages, all the truth of the new covenant, or the altar of God, was thrown down. All the truth of life was changed. And so in a sense, they'll say through this, we can see the altar of God was destroyed. So because of that, who must appear a second time right before the great and dreadful day of the Lord comes in order to restore all things? It has to be the prophet Elijah. But the only one who can fulfill the true prophecy of the prophet Elijah has to be God himself, God the Father, Jehovah, right? And so they'll say that is why Ahnsahnghong appeared in the last days. And what did he do? He restored all the truth of the new covenant, going up against 850 different denominations and doctrines of Christianity. And he comes out on top. Through his truth, the world can come back and turn their hearts back to God, right? But then they'll say, the purpose, this is World Mission Society's teaching of Elijah. Remember, Elijah himself was John the Baptist, right? John the Baptist was the one who Jesus said was the Elijah that was to come. And he prepared the way for Jesus Christ. And so they'll say Ahnsahnghong claimed to be Elijah. And the world is confused about that. Even slanderers will say he just claimed to be Elijah. But the reason why is because he had the mission to prepare the way for the real Christ, which is who? Heavenly Mother. And so just as Elijah restored the people's hearts in the Old Testament back to the true God through the covenant, because the 12 stones represents covenant in the Bible, 12 represents covenant. Also, Ahnsahnghong would use the new covenant to return our hearts back to the true God, which is Heavenly Mother. So by restoring the truth of the new covenant, that is how Mother is revealed. And so that's kind of like the gist of that prophecy, right? But the funny thing is that Ahnsahnghong didn't see it that way, right? Of course, there are some similarities, but like always, there's contradictions. So let me try to share my screen.
And also just a quick thought on that, just as you're saying that, I just was thinking back to what we were just talking about. You know, if Ahnsahnghong's purpose as Elijah was to reveal Mother, well, we've already seen how he believed that New Jerusalem wouldn't appear on earth until 1,000 years after the world ended. And so, even members who might hear these different prophecies and be putting them together and thinking, oh yeah, that sounds convincing. Well, you got to think about what Ahnsahnghong actually said, his actual words, and realize that even with all this, there's a significant issue. If Ahnsahnghong didn't believe that that New Jerusalem could appear on this earth until 1,000 years after the world ended, even if Ahnsahnghong is supposed to be, preparing the way for Mother to appear, well, it can't be Zhang Gil Jah. It can't be her. That can't be the one that he was preparing the way for, because the world hasn't ended yet, and she's already here. She's not supposed to be here for another 1,000 years, according to his own words. So yeah, it's just, I think just thinking about some of these things and recognizing, again, the places where the WMSCOG is telling the story that pretty clearly contradicts some of the clear teachings of Ahnsahnghong.
So, as I was saying, there's going to be contradictions when it comes to the way the World Mission Society teaches Elijah and the way Ahnsahnghong viewed Elijah. So let's look at how Ahnsahnghong viewed the mission of Elijah. We're actually reading from one of the 3 missing chapters of the Green Book. This chapter is Elijah Will Be Sent, chapter 36. And so if we read it in, let's start in Malachi. Jordan, could you zoom in a little bit on there, or is that?
I think that's as far as I can go, but when I edit, I'll be able to zoom in on it. So, are you able to?
I
see
made
it
it
enough
a little
to read
bit
it?
bigger. Yep, I made it a little bit bigger. So it says Malachi chapter 3, verse 1 through 3. It says, "See, I will send my messenger who prepares the way before me. Then suddenly the Lord you are seeking will come to his temple. The messenger of the covenant whom you desire will come, says the Lord Almighty. He will sit as a refiner and purifier of silver. He will purify the Levites and refine them like gold and silver. Then the Lord will have men who will bring offerings and righteousness. As per this prophecy, John the prophet testified Jesus as a Messiah, and while the priests were unaware, the Lord they were seeking went to his temple, and Jesus also taught them on a daily basis." John 7:14 through 29. Therefore, while the prophecy in chapter 4 of Malachi addresses Elijah's mission, there is a vast conflict about the question of when the prophecy first came about. However, verse 1, chapter 3 of Malachi, or verse 5, chapter 4 of Malachi, both address the same issue, Elijah's mission. So it was only a slight shadow of the whole picture that was shown to John the Baptist. The final fulfillment of the prophecy is the prophecy that will come just before the second coming of Jesus. Because the first actual Elijah had ascended when he was alive, 2 Kings 2:11, the last Elijah's mission is to transform and descend while he is alive. The last Elijah's mission is to transform and ascend along with the live 144,000 saints. Therefore, when the day of second coming of Jesus nears, he will first send Elijah the prophet, and who would testify fully as if one is seeing the first coming of Jesus, and he will thereafter return.
Interesting, Edgar. Very interesting. So, that's problematic. That's highly problematic, isn't it?
Very problematic, yes, because for one, we can see that Ahnsahnghong is clearly testifying about Jesus, and we can see he's testifying himself as the Elijah. He's indirect. That's what he's getting at, right? That he is this Elijah. But not only that, one of the biggest things that I find very problematic, even I don't mean to jump ships, because or switch topics, but right now in the World Mission Society, there's a big deal going on where now we're hearing the church is preparing the members for Zhang Gil Jah's death, right? And so we're not wishing death upon her, but this is what we're hearing. And so we were told for the longest of times that she would not pass away. And now they are saying that she could pass away, and that when that happens, members should stay, right? And so where did we get that teaching from? This is from this teaching of Elijah, not from Ahnsahnghong's book, from the what I was saying at first when I was preaching. The World Mission Society, their syllabus of Mission of Elijah, they teach that Ahnsahnghong was Elijah who prepared the way for Christ, which is Heavenly Mother. And so we were taught that just as John the Baptist had the mission of Elijah, but Jesus was the real Elijah, because like I mentioned in one of the first verses, the prophecy of Elijah can only be really fulfilled by God himself. So then they'll say, Ahnsahnghong came with the mission of Elijah to prepare the way for the actual Elijah, or God herself, which is God the Mother. But what does Ahnsahnghong say in his book? Whichever Elijah you want to say, whether it's him or her, they're supposed to ascend alive with 144,000 saints. So why are they now jumping ships? Obviously, Ahnsahnghong was not talking about her. He's talking about himself, that he would ascend alive with 144,000, but that didn't happen.
That didn't happen.
1985. So after his death, the World Mission Society was started through Jucho Kim and Zhang Gil Jah, and they basically took his teaching and switched it around and made it seem like it was her that he was actually preparing the way for, and that she would be the one that would ascend alive with 144,000 saints. Only problem is now they're also taking that teaching away. So isn't that something?
And so that and that's what they did with the New Song book, right? Weren't there some of the songs that referenced Mother ascending alive with the 144,000 saints? And conveniently, they just removed those. So it seems like, they're doing some preliminary damage control, if you will. They're kind of getting ready for, I think, and as you said, not something we're wishing or hoping would happen. By the way, in saying everything we're saying in this video, we're not coming here with like hateful intentions, or like we don't hate these people. We don't think everybody in this organization is evil. I think there's some evil, money hungry, power hungry people in the organization, but we don't wish ill will toward any of these people. The goal of this is just to give you guys information that the church has not given you access to, because I think the things Edgar's sharing, man, I'm saying like the issue you're sharing here, the specific point out of this portion of his book is huge, but I'm seeing 3 or 4 other issues popping up that are just like these glaring problems for the World Mission Society Church of God. But this one's big because he says Elijah will ascend alive. Now, they obviously had to change what they're saying about the identity of Elijah because, well, Ahnsahnghong died and he didn't ascend alive, so that's a problem. Well, what's going to happen when inevitably Zhang Gil Jah, who is a human being, not God, she's a woman, she will die like all the rest of us, and it's going to happen. She's getting old. How old is she now? She in her 70s, 80s?
I think 80s.
80s. So it's going to be coming. It's going to happen. And then you're going to be left with what are they going to do? That's why they have to just get these sort of teachings and writings out of the sight of members. They have to remove chapters. They have to change and alter things because it just lies. When you're telling lies, it forces you over time into just telling more lies and more lies. And it just becomes this intricate, convoluted mess of having to cover up, and then you have to cover up for the cover up, and then cover up for the cover up of the cover up, and it's just this massive mess. But that's a problem. That's a problem right there.
That's a good analogy, man. It's like, trying to fix a hole in the, one of the pipes at your house with some tape or something, or, what I mean? Right. And just another hole comes out from somewhere else. And that's what they're trying to do, is this damage control. Yep. And it's crazy to me. And also WMSCOG members, just so you know, the people that might be helping writing some of these prophecies, or in the headquarter church, not just Ahnsahnghong's writings get taken away or switched up, even Juchil Kim's, because they're after Ahnsahnghong's death, they switched it to, well, she has to be the Elijah, and now they're switching that up. So if I were you guys, I'd just give it up and just stop writing prophecies, because you never know, maybe your prophecy might get changed later on too if you're one of the people coming up with these things. So just give it a rest.
They're obviously just throwing stuff out in the dark and just hoping something sticks, and when it doesn't, they're just taking it back, and it's just a crapshoot.
All right, so now let's go to the next page.
So real quick, Edgar, I want to see and ask you if this is an issue or if I'm missing something. But to me, when I read this, another issue that stands out to me is he says there at that bottom or the second to bottom paragraph, therefore, when the day of the second coming of Jesus nears, he will first send Elijah the prophet, who would testify fully, et cetera, et cetera. So, well, wait, let me finish that. Who would testify fully as if one is seeing the first coming of Jesus, and he will thereafter return. So I guess a couple things that kind of stand out to me about that. One is that Ahnsahnghong seems to be talking about the coming of Jesus, the second coming, as a future event, right? And these writings, the way he's talking about it, and other places where he talks about it, he's always talking about it with this sense of it being something he's looking to happen in the future, not something that has already happened. Now it's just a strange way of talking about it. If he himself was second coming Christ, why is he speaking about it as something that's yet to come? So I think that what that tells me is just another evidence that he didn't think he was second coming Christ. He didn't think he was Jesus. He thought the second coming was something to happen in the future, not something that he himself fulfilled. The other thing about this is he's referencing Elijah preparing the way for Jesus. Like he'll specifically mention the name of Jesus here multiple times. So it's not like he's just saying when Elijah appears again and this second fulfillment of Elijah is taking place, he's going to be, preparing the way for Christ, because if it was just that he was saying, then, maybe you could weasel in the idea that he's referencing Mother God. But the problem is he's talking about Elijah preparing the way for the second coming of Jesus. And so, how are you going to fit Zhang Gil Jah into this identity of Jesus? Because it's Jesus that's the one that is the one that Elijah is supposed to be preparing the way for, not simply Christ, but Jesus Christ. Zhang Gil Jah isn't Jesus, and so I think that's another problem there, as far as I can tell.
So it is. It's actually a massive problem, but. Man, how can we, Jordan? We honestly, man, we gotta make another video sometime, because there's so much that I have to say that I can't say, right now for the sake of time. But Ahnsahnghong's writings are very confusing. So it's not just you. You might be thinking, well, maybe because I wasn't a member. No, even to members, they might be reading this and it's like, it's so confusing. But there's a reason why. And this is all understanding that I've gained recently from getting in contact with the actual living disciples of Ahnsahnghong, people that were baptized by Ahnsahnghong himself. And when Ahnsahnghong started this whole thing, he never claimed to be Christ. He never claimed to be God. None of this. He thought he was Elijah. And that makes sense when you're reading a book like this, that he's writing this in the early days. The problem is that as time went on and he began to be influenced by Suin and started seeing kind of what was going on in Korea at the time, saw the chance to gain more power, that is when he began to kind of sway his thinking to maybe I can run with this whole second coming Christ thing. And that's why
Mm-hmm.
you see towards the end of his life, he started to adopt some of these prophecies and talk more about them. That's why it was always very confusing as a member, because like, man, in some places he writes like if he's not God. And then in some places he writes like if he is the second coming Christ. Well, it's because of his thinking changed. And the funny thing is, I know members might be watching this and they're going to be like, oh, he was just being humble like Jesus, and because Jesus had to reveal himself at an appointed time, right? Jesus,
Right.
the problem with that is Jesus had already told who the his early disciples who he was. The Bible already prophesied who he was. Ahnsahnghong literally lied. There's so much more to the story that members do not know. Members, did you know that Ahnsahnghong was not even the leader of his original church when he established it? Yes, you heard it right. He was not the leader of his own church when he established it. The General Assembly chose someone else to lead the church because Ahnsahnghong was very young and inexperienced at that time. If he's God, how could God permit someone else to lead his own church while he's there? Not only
Hmm.
that, but even the elders in Korea say he did not even know how to calculate the Passover feast for the first couple of years after being kicked out of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So God Almighty couldn't even calculate his own feast. And it gets worse. He had to go ask the Jehovah's Witness Church in Korea because they did know how to calculate it. How do you get second coming Christ from that? And so this whole story, it really deserves its
Wow.
own video. But for the
Wow.
sake
Yeah.
of time, just to address what you said, because it just brought the thought in my mind. Yes, it's confusing because Ahnsahnghong was a very confused man.
Yeah.
But one thing that is about to be exposed, because I like that you brought it up, that they can't make it about God the Mother, because one thing is when they're talking about the image of God, and you've covered this a lot, Jordan, about when they say there's two images. They'll say the male image of God is Father, Son, Holy Spirit, right? Trinity, right? And so the
Right.
female image of God can no way, shape, or form be connected to Father, Son, Holy Spirit, Jehovah, Jesus, or Holy Spirit, right? Well, let's look at the
Mm-hmm.
next page. Let's hear
Okay.
Ahnsahnghong clarify something real quick. Okay, so it says at the top, historically, Elijah does not have a father, a mother, genealogy, beginning of days, nor end of life, then ascends to heaven. Similar to the ancient Melchizedek, he closely resembles the Son of God. As it is written, Hebrews 7, 2 through 3, first his name means King of Righteousness, then also King of Salem means King of Peace. Without father and mother, without genealogy, without beginning of days or end of life, like the Son of God, he remains a priest forever. This symbolizes the flesh and blood of God who comes in disguise. Elijah's situation is similar to the one of Melchizedek's. Most of the people recorded in the Bible have their parents' names or genealogy identified, but Elijah and Melchizedek's parental names, genealogy, and their day of their beginning and end are not identified. The final Elijah would come to an end by finding and testifying all the truth that had been trampled during the dark ages. That Elijah, God Jehovah, as the final
Hmm.
judge, along with the 144,000 saints, will be transferred into angels and ascended. Malachi the prophet said that Elijah the prophet will be sent last. So we have a problem. Did you
Mm-hmm.
catch it, Jordan?
I think I'm catching it.
Yeah. So God Jehovah, according
God
to
Jehovah.
Ahnsahnghong,
Right.
is the one who will fulfill the mission of Elijah, the last Elijah. Well, if I listen to World Mission Society logic, they say Mother God is separate from the
It can't
Trinity.
be.
It can't
Can't be
be.
Jehovah.
It can't be. So
No.
then where do they have the gall? Deal with this, World Mission Society. How did you make Mother to be Elijah and to ascend with 144,000 saints. I know now you're removing it. Now it's damage control, but you can't get rid of all the members from decades ago that remember, that have the notes, that have the syllabuses, that have the teachings that you taught us, that 144,000 would go up to heaven alive holding the hands of Mother. The new song books have Mother ascending alive as the last Elijah with 144,000 saints. Now they're removed. Deal with it.
That's a problem. That's a problem. And I think it just deserves the question of, if this church, which claims to be the only church with the truth of God, if they're constantly having to change their teachings, if they're for years clearly teaching one thing, only later on to take that away and teach something entirely different, or say, no, we never taught that. Why would you believe anything they're saying now? Who's to say that anything that they're telling you now, that in 5-10 years, they're not going to change it, take it away and say, oh, no, that's not true now. Here's something else. So you're living your entire life based on these ideas being given to you from a church who is constantly shifting those ideas, putting them out there and then taking them away, saying, here's the truth. Oh, no, that's not the truth. Here's the actual truth. Oh, wait, no, that's not the truth. Believe this. Oh, wait, no, don't believe that. We never said that. Like you're just, you have no ground to stand on. Like, what are you standing on? What confidence can you have that anything you're believing now, anything that you're living your life for now, based on the teachings of the church, what basis do you have to believe that any of that is true, or that it's going to be true tomorrow or in the next 5 years? Or how do you know that it's not going to be something that they completely withdraw and take away and change? You can't, because the pattern, the history of this church shows that they're constantly having to change their teaching. And why? Why is that? Well, this is just what all these sort of organizations have to do, is, as again, when you're established, you're based upon a lie. As time goes on, lies they're naturally going to be found out. Lies are going to encounter problems. It's just the nature of truth and error. That error is always going to come into conflict with reality around it. So as lies are existing in reality, it's going to come up against problems and issues that are going to cause those false ideas issues. So they're going to have to change it and shift it. This is what groups like this have to do to survive. But what that should tell you is that the World Mission Society Church of God is a liar. The organization is a lie. Its teachings are lies, and you can't trust them. You can't put any confidence in them. And I think all this is just such clear proof of that.
And I just want to mention one thing, man. This is crazy. And like I said, I'm trying to refrain from saying, too much, but I just can't help it because there's so much things going on right now. Like, for instance, Jordan, right now, their general pastor is actually coming to the States because, from what I've heard, they're watching the videos on YouTube and they're trying to do damage control because people are leaving in mass numbers, right? But here's the kicker. You just brought up the books. The funny thing is, like you just mentioned, you said the books sometimes, they take them away and they're constantly changing things, right? Well, right now, one of the pastors from the World Mission Society went rogue, and now he started his own church called New Jerusalem Church of God. His name is Pastor Daniel Park, and he's actually giving the books of Ahnsahnghong, the original books, to the members to read. And also the churches in Korea do the same thing. They don't hide the books. And so what I've heard through the grapevine is now the World Mission Society is contemplating, or at least having educations where they're going more in depth in the books. And I'm just going to call it right here, right now. I have a feeling they're eventually going to release the books to the members, because now that there's more books in circulation, they know members are going to get access to them eventually, and when they read
Yep.
it, they're going to leave unless the World Mission Society just straight up gives it to you and starts,
And
you
they
know,
tell their
giving you
story about it first.
exactly. And so what
Yeah.
is that? But members, think about it for a second. How is that honest? How can you trust them? The same place that told you those books were not needed. The same people that said there's a reason why these books were not made. They were a countermeasure. They were temporary. Now, if they're trying to let you read them, if they even plan on giving them to you, why is it? It's because they're falling. They don't know. They don't. They're backed into the
They're
corner.
desperate.
They don't know what to
Yeah.
do anymore. At this point, it's just damage control.
Wow. And the supposed slanderers are the ones that are forcing them to release these books. It's a crazy thing if that actually happens. That, you know, again, they have this story about why members don't need access to these books, why they don't need to be made available. You don't need these. You don't need the 3 removed chapters from the Green Book. You don't need this book about Ahnsahnghong where he clearly refuted the idea of Mother God. But now that the supposed slanderers have brought these to light and put attention on them, oh, well, now they have to change their story. That just seems strange to me that the Church of God would have to kind of like just go with the winds of these false prophets online, and they just have to kind of follow their lead in a sense of, oh, we're saying they're not needed, but, you know, apparently these guys are in charge because they're making them available to everybody. So I guess we just got to do what, you know, kind of follow suit and do what they're doing. It's just kind of crazy.
And nothing makes sense. Like, all they do is damage control members. If you don't see it, I mean, it's literally staring you in the face. They're literally ripping out the new song pages that you had in your book because it's going against their doctrine that they taught. They're telling you to rip it out. Are you not asking yourself why? Are you not reading the lyrics and seeing how it's problematic with what they're teaching now? This place is just, it's very telling, and it shows you how adaptive they are. They can literally just switch everything on the fly, and members just gobble it up, you know, and it's crazy to me.
Yep. Yeah. And that's why, you know, we make videos like this. That's why we make videos at all about groups like this, because at the end of the day, you know, we have our opinions, and there's, you know, I think there's a much better way of looking at the Bible, of understanding what the gospel is all about what Jesus was all about who God really is and what the Bible says about him. I think there's a lot better ways of understanding that than what the WMS offers. And groups like this, their behaviors, the lies, the cover-ups, the constant shifting back and forth. You know, it'd be one thing if the WMSCOG was presenting themselves as like, you know, we're learning, we're trying to figure this out, or they were acknowledging, hey, we got this wrong. You know, if they had some humility to say, hey, actually, you know, we did teach this, we did say this, we're sorry, like we were wrong about that, and they owned it. And then they said, but here's what we actually think. We're learning, we're adapting, but they don't even acknowledge it. It's like the narcissism involved in it, where it's like, oh no, we didn't even say that. And they gaslight you into thinking that it is actually you who did something wrong to think that they said what they clearly did say. It's just the manipulation, the lies. And so we make videos like this because I just think people deserve better. You know, members deserve a better life than what this group is offering. And in a lot of ways, through emotional, spiritual manipulation, forcing people into a way of life through fear tactics and other things, just these high control methods that ultimately just keeps people in this religious prison. And I think there's so much there's just a better way to live your life. You deserve more than that. It's not fair that groups like this get so much power over people, and at the same time they're so obviously full of so much deception and just bull crap.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that this is where critical thinking, is something that every person has to embrace and pursue. And so the WMS, like you said, Edgar, they're going to have their story. They're going to spin their own story about all these things, as they've always done. But at some point, you have to stop and think, like, is this really what makes the most sense? Is what they're saying to me, does that really make sense? And again, I think you need to look at all these writings of Ahnsahnghong and just see the countless contradictions and issues here. And I think you're going to see what we see so clearly. The WMS just doesn't know what they're talking about. They're just, in large part, they're making stuff up as they go. And that's just what lies have to do. That's what error has to do, is it just has to kind of adapt and change and shift and manipulate. So with that said, Edgar, is there anything else on this, the Elijah point in specific that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, because just for the simple fact that I know members are going to be like, oh, or maybe not members, but the leadership, they're like, well, he didn't mention this one. I just want to make sure we cover all the grounds, because it's really silly arguments. So like, one of the things they'll also say is like, Ahnsahnghong fulfills Elijah because of the appearance, right? And so that what they'll do is they'll go to the Old Testament references for Elijah's physical appearance. Let's look at one of them. If you could pull up on the screen, let's do Matthew chapter 3.
Okay.
I'm sorry. 2 Kings chapter 1. This is about Elijah. I guess for some context, I'll start reading from verse 5. It says, the messengers returned to the king, and he said to them, why have you returned? And they said to him, there came a man to meet us and said to us, go back to the king who sent you and say to him, thus says the Lord. Is it because there is no God in Israel that you are sending to inquire of Beelzebub, the god of Ekron? Therefore you shall not come down from the bed to which you have gone up, but you shall surely die. He said to them, what kind of man was he who came to meet you and told you these things? They answered him, he wore a garment of hair with a belt of leather about his waist. And he said, it is Elijah the Tishbite. And so they'll say, what was Elijah's characteristics? In the Old Testament, Elijah wore a robe, right, of hair, right? And it says he had a garment of hair with a belt of leather around his waist, right? And then they'll say, now watch this. They're like, go to the New Testament and let's look at John the Baptist, who came with the mission of Elijah. Go to the book of Matthew chapter 3. Because they have it's got to be connecting, right? So Matthew chapter 3, and
which version do you have, by the way?
NIV.
Okay, let me switch to that just so it's the same. Okay,
and
Matthew 3.
We can read from verse 1. It says, in those days John the Baptist came preaching in the wilderness of Judea and saying, repent, for the kingdom of heaven has come near. This is he who was spoken of through the prophet Isaiah, a voice of one calling in the wilderness, prepare the way for him, make straight paths for him, which is Malachi, by the way, or in Isaiah. So it says, John's clothes were made of camel's hair, and he had a leather belt around his waist. His food was locusts and wild honey. So they'll say, you see, even physically, John the Baptist fits the description of the what? Spiritual prophetical Elijah. Because Elijah in the Old Testament wore a what? Camel's hair, animal's hair, robe, and a what? Leather belt around his waist. So they'll say, guess what Ahnsahnghong had, who is the reality of Elijah, the real prophetical Elijah. Now, can you hit the slide? Let's do the robe one first. Yeah. So
that one.
Yeah. Guess who that belonged to? That one belonged to Ahnsahnghong. And what does that look like? A robe of
Looks
hair,
like a
right?
leather belt. Yeah.
And a leather belt, right? And so they'll say, this is father's robe and his leather belt. This must mean surely he is Elijah. Go to the next slide. Here he is again with the same robe and the same leather belt around his waist. And one more, please. There he is again, baptizing just like John the Baptist. Surely this has to be Elijah, who the Bible prophesied about. Wrong. So, like everything else, right? This is a pretty dumb argument to obviously they
Yeah.
show you this at the end after they study with you and they tell you that you know that Ahnsahnghong was the Elijah and he had to fulfill the prophecy, and just as the icing on the cake, here's him with the picture of the animal hair and the leather belt around his waist. But the problem is that the Bible never prophesied that the mission of Elijah had to be repeated again in the last days. This is just like everything else, made up out of thin air. There is no verse in the Bible that tells you that Elijah has to appear again after he already appeared as John the Baptist. They have to play off of Malachi chapter 4, where it says that he will appear before the grateful and dreadful day of the Lord comes. They'll say Elijah has to appear to restore all things. The problem with that is that Jesus already said that the fulfillment of that prophecy was John the Baptist, not Ahnsahnghong. So let's go to the book of Matthew. It's actually one of their own verses that they read. They just don't go to the context. They don't read after that. Go to the book of Matthew chapter 17. So this is one of the verses they use for the prophecy of Elijah. And Matthew
Okay.
chapter 17. And let's go ahead and read from verse 11. Verse 11, it says, so verse 10, it says, the disciples asked him, why then do the teachers of the law say that Elijah must come first? Jesus replied, to be sure Elijah comes and will restore all things. So what do they say? Remember, I used this verse when I was preaching World Mission Society style. They say, look, Elijah has to restore all things. Just as Elijah restored the broken altar of God in the Old Testament, so Ahnsahnghong had to restore all the lost hidden truth of the new covenant in the last days. But there's a problem with that. Keep reading. So verse 11, Jesus replied, to be sure Elijah has come and will restore all things. But I tell you, Elijah has already come, and they did not recognize him, but have done to him everything they wished. In the same way, the Son of Man is going to suffer at their hands. Then the disciples understood that he was talking to them about John the Baptist. Do you see Ahnsahnghong anywhere in the footnote right there? No,
I'm not
right? So
seeing it, man. I don't know.
maybe we
Maybe
don't
it's in
have
another
spiritual
version.
eyes. Yeah, man. Maybe in the Korean version. I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know. Yeah,
But
so
so
he was saying Elijah has already come.
exactly. Exactly. And so funny how they don't mention that verse in that study. I know they have countermeasure. They always have something to say about everything, but you can't go against the plain. You can't argue. You can try to argue your way out all you want, but the thing is, the Bible says don't go beyond what is written, and Jesus says here very clearly that Elijah had already come. So the fact that they
Mm,
even cherry pick verse 11 to say that this is a where in verse 11 does it say that this is a prophecy for 2,000 years in the future? It doesn't say that. If you
it
just
doesn't.
continue to read, you will see that this prophecy was already beautifully fulfilled by John the Baptist and Jesus Christ 2,000 years ago. So yeah,
Wow.
these are just some of the points that I wanted to bring up, concerning Elijah. There is more things, but like I said, maybe we can do that at another time. Dive into some more of Ahnsahnghong's books where he mentions, more about Elijah. But yeah, that's kind of the gist of that.
Okay. Well, I've got about 8 minutes left till I have to go pick up my kids from school. And so let's just, since we mentioned the 3 chapters, we won't be able to give this the full attention that it deserves, but let's just kind of end the video with one thing I just wanted to point out here. Okay. So again, I'll link this, web page where you can read this. You can read the 3 removed chapters from the Green Book. Just to remind you, this book is supposed to have 3 more chapters. The WMS decided that you didn't need to know all of God's words. They decided that for whatever reason, that when the Bible says do not add to or take away from God's words, they didn't really have to listen to that, and they could just take out what they wanted. Well, I think there's, when you look at the 3 chapters that they removed, you can kind of see why they probably thought it was necessary to remove those, because once again, you see how what Ahnsahnghong taught and believed and wrote about, again, it deviated, it contradicts their doctrine. So so this is in chapter 1, I think. I think this was originally chapter 1 of the Green Book. So just this little section, and again, you can read this yourself for the full context, but he's talking about and predicting basically when the end of the world would come. He goes into like this 40 years and references a lot of different scriptures that kind of reference a 40-year time period. And so here he says, since the Israeli nation came to independence in 1948, it makes it 1988, 40 years after. So he's kind of building up this argument to explain how the world is going to end 40 years after 1948. Then he says, will the world really come to an end at that time? Or will there only be a minor change in the Israeli nation like what happened in the past? As Jesus said, as soon as its twigs get tender and its leaves come out, you know that summer is near. Even so, when you see all these things, you know that it is near, right at the door. And then he says this, it will surely come to an end at that time. At what time? When is the world going to come to an end? 1988. Edgar, we missed it.
Man,
I was born 1 year. I was born 1 year after the end of the world. Crazy, man. I missed it by a year.
So you're telling me I missed 2 raptures and the end of the world? This is crazy, man. I'm kind of upset.
Crazy. Yeah. And so judging, even taken back to what we were saying before in 1988, he said the New Jerusalem would appear 1,000 years after the end of the world. So 2988 would be when Mother God, according to Ahnsahnghong, could appear.
Yeah.
But this tells you why, if you go and read these chapters, you're going to see why the WMS removed them. And because here it makes Ahnsahnghong a false prophet, for one.
Yeah. And I just want to mention something, because now that you brought up the 1988 and the 40 years that Ahnsahnghong mentioned, in the church, they actually show a video, and this actually so incriminating against them, but they obviously stopped showing it as this was like in the early on. But they showed us a video where in Korea at the 1988 Olympics in Seoul, there's all these, different people that represent like countries, and they have masks, they're dressed in costumes, and they're representing their culture, and basically they're like running on the field. There's clips of this. I have a clip in case people want to see it, but that they're running in masks, they're representing like all of the world, all the people of the world, and they say there's 850 different nations there. And so what were they implying? They were implying the mission of Elijah, because just like Elijah went up against 850 false prophets, 850 different nations there were to represent spiritually 850 different denominations and doctrines. That means even in 1988, after Ahnsahnghong had already died, they still believed that that 1988 was the end of the world. And what happened?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing.
Nothing. And that makes Ahnsahnghong a false prophet, which seems pretty obvious, would mean he's not God. And so yeah, so what do? Well, let's just cut that out of his book. Let's just cut it out. Because it's not helping our story. It's not helping us get control of members and get their tithes and get the millions of dollars that we're getting from their tithes and offerings. So let's just cut that out.
Yeah.
Because they don't want you to know the truth. They're not after the truth. This church that claims to be the only church that has the truth, man, they sure like to tell lies. They sure like to change their story and flip-flop back and forth. And they sure like to hide things from their members. So
I would say what Jesus said, by their fruit you will recognize them. If this place was founded on lies, on a foundation of lies, they continue to lie. They continue to take away and put back into circulation, take away and put back into circulation. What kind of fruit are they showing? What kind of fruit are they displaying? Ask yourself if this could be the true church. There's no way.
No way. So, yeah, there's a lot more that could be said that hopefully we will be able to say in future videos. I'm definitely very intrigued to hear more about this person that was this person that stayed at your house. You're saying that this person was a direct disciple of Ahnsahnghong?
So not of Ahnsahnghong. The other leaders in the church, they're direct disciples of Ahnsahnghong. He was a disciple of Zhang Gil Jah from the beginning.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and so he was actually a leader of the World Mission Society. He was in the inner circle. He was a senior pastor. His room was right across the hall from Zhang Gil Jah's office in the Jerusalem temple. So he saw it all go down. And the reason why he had such a high position in the church is because he worked for the Korean government. So there's a lot of things. There's a lot of stories there, and maybe we can get into that at another time. But yeah, he ended up leaving, and he joined Ahnsahnghong's original church, and now he is there leading it with Ahnsahnghong's original disciples. But there's a lot more to the story that needs to be told, and it's very, very fascinating.
I bet. Okay, well, hopefully we can get into all that in the future. And so, yeah, I hope this left whoever is watching this left you with something to think about. And as we've been saying throughout this video, if you're a current member, especially here, I hope that you'll, don't take our word for it. That's the big thing that I want to push here, I guess, at the end. Something that the WMSCOG and groups like it do not push, which is to don't take our word for it. Go look into these things for yourself. There's a reason that groups like this, the World Mission Society Church of God, tells you don't go to the internet, and that they put all this fear around it, making you think you're going to die spiritually if you watch a video like this, or if you go and look up these missing chapters. Well, why do they put all this fear around it? Well, because they're afraid of the truth. They're afraid of you discovering what the real story is. It's not because they're actually wanting you to have the truth, the full truth. They're wanting to keep it from you so that they can keep their grip on you. They can keep their control of you. And so I just encourage you all to, again, don't take me and Edgar's word for it. Here, again, we're going to post links. You can see all those books behind Edgar, that if you want to know more about what's said in these books, we'll put links to some of them at least. I'm not sure what all books you have there. It looks like you have a big collection, but we'll put links to the 3 missing chapters. We'll put a link to the book where he refutes Mother God, and things like that in the description of this video. And so you can just go and you can search these things out for yourself. And that's what, if even in Acts the Berean Jews were commended because after they heard the preaching of the gospel, it says that they went away to search the scriptures to see if it was true. They went away and they did their own research. They didn't just take what they heard, not even from the apostles. They didn't even listen to the direct apostles of Jesus and say, well, they said it, so I'm going to believe it. I'm not going to think about it for myself. I'm just going to believe what they said. And that was the direct apostles of Jesus. So, and they were commended for it. Acts talks about how that was, it was a good thing they did that. And so if that's the case for the direct, the apostles of Jesus, that the Jews not taking their word for it was a commendable thing, how much more is it a commendable thing if you don't take the word of this organization that exists 2,000 years removed from Jesus and just say, oh, well, these people say these things about the Bible. This is what they say the Bible says, and that's what it means, so I guess I'm just going to believe it. No, go and look into it yourself. They say Ahnsahnghong believed X, Y, and Z. Go look at what Ahnsahnghong actually wrote. Go look at these chapters they've removed, the books that they have hidden from you, and see if it's actually true. If it is, if it holds up, then stay in the group. That's fine. And as we always say, the truth has nothing to hide. The truth has nothing to be afraid of. So you should not be afraid of going to the internet. Anything that any information you could possibly encounter should not have any sort of impact or hold any sort of threat to the actual truth, because the truth can withstand anything. It's just the nature of what truth is, that it's going to be proven to be correct. No matter how much scrutiny you put on it, no matter how much you dig into it and research. So just go and do that. Go and do that for yourself. And I think you'll find that the story you've been told is not true. So, Edgar, thanks for being here. It's been fun doing this again. It's been too long, but hopefully we can get back on soon and do another one.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me, man. And also, for the people watching, if you want to see more content, I got Defusing the WMSCOG on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. On the Instagram and TikTok, I post more like articles and kind of like updates of what's going on in the church, what I hear in between. And I'm also trying to expand to like the Spanish community. I actually got working with someone in Peru right now, and also just did a interview with a member from Puebla, Mexico. And so, yeah, because there's a lot of people from, the Spanish community that want to speak out. So, yeah, if anyone's watching this that speaks Spanish and you want to do an interview, hit me up. If you guys have any questions or whatever, I'm available. And Jordan, thanks again, man, for having me on the show, bro. It's always a pleasure, man. And thanks a lot.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so Defusing the WMSCOG, go check them out and subscribe. That link will be in the description as well. So, all right. Well, thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time.